These stories were shared by real people. Names and locations have been changed, but what happened was described exactly as they remember it. Let me ask you something before we begin. Have you ever walked into a hospital late at night? Not visiting hours, not emergency chaos. I mean the hours when the halls are quiet, the lights are dimmed, and every sound feels louder than it should. If you've been there, stay with me. If you haven't, imagine it with me now. This happened to a nurse I'll call Emily. Emily had been working the night shift at a mid-sized hospital for nearly 6 years. She wasn't new, and she wasn't the type to scare easily. She'd seen death, she'd cleaned blood off her shoes. She'd sat with patients as their breathing slowed and finally stopped. Hospitals, at night especially, teach you how to shut certain feelings off just to survive. But there was one floor she never liked: the fourth floor. The fourth floor used to be a long-term care ward years ago. By the time Emily worked there, it had been converted into overflow rooms. It was almost never full. Most nights, only 2 or 3 patients stayed there, which meant long, quiet hours with very little movement. That night, Emily was assigned to cover the floor alone. At around 1:40 a.m., the first call light went off. If you don't know, every hospital bed has a call button. When a patient presses it, a light flashes at the nurse's station and a quiet chime sounds. Nothing dramatic, just a soft reminder that someone needs help. The light was coming from room 417. Emily frowned. She remembered that room clearly because it was supposed to be empty. She'd checked the chart at the beginning of her shift. 414 occupied, 418 occupied, 417 vacant. Still, mistakes happen. Patients get moved without notice. She grabbed her clipboard and walked down the hall. And listen closely here. Imagine this walk with me. The lights were dimmed, the kind of yellow glow that makes shadows stretch along the walls. Her shoes echoed softly. No voices, no TVs, just the hum of machines and the distant beep of a monitor somewhere far away. She stopped in front of room 417. The door was closed. That was the first strange thing. She knocked lightly, waited, then pushed the door open. The room was empty. No bed, no IV stand, no patient. Just a clean, made room, exactly the way it had looked at the start of her shift. Emily stood there for a few seconds, feeling embarrassed. Maybe the light was triggered accidentally. Maybe maintenance was working on the panel. She turned the call light off and went back to the desk. Now, here's where I want you to tell me, in your head, what you would have done next. Because 3 minutes later, the call light went off again. Same room. This time, Emily felt a small twist of irritation. She walked back down the hall, faster now, opened the door, and again found nothing. No sound, no movement, no explanation. She shut the door, turned the light off, and this time, she checked the panel. Everything looked normal. At 2:12 a.m., the call light went off again, but this time, it didn't stop. The chime kept repeating every few seconds like someone was holding the button down. Emily didn't walk right away. She stood at the desk, staring at the flashing number. Her stomach felt tight. She told herself what you'd probably tell yourself right now. It's a wiring issue. Old building, old systems. Still, she picked up the phone and called security. They told her no maintenance was scheduled and suggested she check the room again. So she did. As she reached for the door handle of room 417, the call light stopped. Just like that. The room was empty. Again. That should have been the end of it. But if it were, I wouldn't be telling you this. At around 3 a.m., Emily was sitting at the desk when she heard something she had never heard before. A voice. It came through the call system speaker. Soft, weak, almost whispering. "Nurse? Please." She froze. Emily stood slowly. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She told herself there had to be a patient somewhere nearby, someone confused, someone pressing the wrong button. But the panel told the truth. Room 417. She walked down the hallway one last time, every step feeling heavier than the last. She pushed the door open and turned the light on. The room was still empty. Again. But the call light above the bed that wasn't there, was glowing red. And then she noticed something new. The bathroom door was open. She hadn't checked it before. She was sure of that. She stood there, listening. The voice didn't speak again, but the room felt occupied. Not visually, not physically, just present. She turned the call light off and backed out of the room without turning her back to it. Emily requested a transfer the next morning. 2 weeks later, she learned something she wished she never had. A patient had died in room 417 years earlier, a long-term care patient who had been unable to move, unable to speak clearly, and who relied entirely on that call button. On the night he died, staff were short-handed. His call light went unanswered for over an hour. Since then, the room had been taken out of regular use. No one told Emily. And one last thing. This part stayed with her more than anything else. When she checked the hospital logs later, she found records showing that on her shift, room 417 had logged multiple call button activations, despite being listed as unoccupied. So, I'll leave you with this. If a hospital room is empty and no one is supposed to be there, then who was asking for help? Before we continue, I want to say this quietly. If you're listening to this late at night, maybe with the lights low, you're exactly where you should be. And if these stories are pulling you in, letting you feel like you're right here with me, take a second after this one and let me know in the comments. It really helps this channel grow, and it lets me know I'm not telling these stories alone. Now, let's continue. This story was shared by a hospital resident I'll call Daniel. Daniel was in his second year of residency at a large urban hospital. Long hours, little sleep, constant pressure. If you've ever worked in a place where mistakes cost lives, you understand how quickly fear becomes background noise. He was assigned to the ICU night rotation, and if you know anything about ICUs, you know they're different. Even during the day, they feel heavy. At night, when the visiting hours end and the lights dim, they feel like waiting rooms between worlds. At around 11:50 p.m., Daniel was reviewing charts when a nurse approached him. She told him there was a patient in bed 6 whose vitals didn't make sense. Blood pressure unstable, heart rate erratic, oxygen levels dropping, but the patient wasn't showing the physical signs that should have matched those numbers. Daniel walked with her to the bed. The patient was an older man, thin, pale, eyes closed. He looked calm, too calm. No labored breathing, no distress. Daniel adjusted the monitor leads, assuming faulty placement. The readings didn't change. Now, let me pause here. Have you ever felt that quiet moment where logic says one thing, but your instincts are pulling you another way? Daniel felt that. He ordered new labs, adjusted medication, and told the nurse to keep a close eye on the patient. As they stepped away, he noticed something odd. The patient's chart had no admission photo. That was unusual, but not impossible. Around 1:30 a.m., an alarm went off. Bed 6. This time, the monitor flatlined for several seconds before restarting on its own. When Daniel reached the bed, the patient's eyes were open, not wide, not panicked, just open, staring at the ceiling. Daniel spoke to him, asking simple questions. The man didn't respond. No blinking, no movement. The nurse whispered that she didn't remember seeing the patient breathe. Daniel leaned closer, and that's when he realized something that made his skin crawl. The patient's chest wasn't rising, not even slightly. They checked for a pulse. Nothing. Yet the monitor behind them continued to display a heartbeat. Let that sink in. No breathing, no pulse, but a steady rhythm on the screen. Daniel ordered a code. The room filled quickly. Compressions began, oxygen administered, adrenaline injected. Nothing changed. After 20 minutes, the time of death was called. The room went quiet again. As staff began disconnecting equipment, one of the nurses froze. She was staring at the monitor. The heart rate was still there, beating, slow, steady, impossible. Daniel thought it was a glitch until the nurse said something that made the room feel colder. She said the monitor showed activity even after it had been disconnected from the patient. They unplugged it from the wall. The screen stayed on. Finally, security was called and the monitor was removed entirely. Daniel stepped out to document the death, but when he pulled the patient's chart back up, bed 6 was empty. No name, no ID number, no admission record, nothing. The system showed that bed 6 hadn't been occupied that night. Daniel assumed a clerical error until he spoke with the charge nurse. She told him something quietly, like she didn't want the walls to hear. 2 months earlier, a patient had died suddenly in that exact bed during a system outage. No monitors, no alarms. Staff didn't realize he was gone until morning rounds. Since then, some staff reported seeing bed 6 assigned briefly and then erased. Daniel finished his shift in silence. Before he left, curiosity got the better of him. He checked the ICU log history. Between 12 a.m. and 2 a.m., bed 6 showed active monitoring. No patient attached, just data. So let me ask you this, and I want you to think about it honestly. If machines are built to track life, what are they measuring when life is already gone? If you're enjoying these stories so far and you want more like this, not rushed, not overdone, just quiet, disturbing truths, take a moment and let me know below. And if you're new here, subscribing means you won't have to face these stories alone next time. One more thing. Daniel never worked another ICU night shift again. And to this day, bed 6 is still occasionally listed as occupied in the system for a few seconds before disappearing, just like the patient.
Before we go any further, I want you to take a second and check where you are. And if you've stayed with me through all 3 stories, let me know after this one. I read those comments, and they matter more than you think. This story was shared by a hospital transport worker I'll call Marcus. Marcus had worked at the hospital for almost 10 years. His job was simple on paper: move patients, transport bodies, deliver equipment. If it needed to go from one place to another, Marcus was the one pushing the gurney. He worked nights by choice. Fewer people, less noise, less explanation. If you've ever been in a hospital after midnight, you know how it feels. Like the building is still awake even when everyone else is asleep. Lights dimmed but never off. Hallways that stretch just a little too long. Elevators that seem to take longer than they should. And Marcus knew every elevator in the building. Or at least, he thought he did. One night, just after 2 a.m., Marcus was called to transport a body from the old surgical wing to the morgue. That alone wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the location. The old surgical wing had been closed for renovations months earlier. Most staff avoided it unless they had no choice. But the call came through the system, clear and official. Room S17. Marcus grabbed a gurney and headed down. The wing was darker than the rest of the hospital. Some overhead lights flickered, others were off completely. His footsteps echoed in a way they didn't elsewhere. Room S17 was at the very end of the hall. The door was already open. Inside was a covered body on a bed. No staff, no paperwork, no family. Marcus hesitated. Now let me ask you, would you have walked in or turned around and called someone? Marcus stepped inside. He checked the wrist tag. No name, just a number he didn't recognize. Still, the body was cold, rigid, clearly deceased. He transferred the body to the gurney, covered it, and wheeled it into the hall. The closest elevator to the morgue was usually elevator C, but when Marcus reached the junction, elevator C's light was off. Instead, an elevator he had never seen before was open. No letter, no number, just an open door. Now pause here, because this matters. Hospitals don't add elevators without staff knowing. Marcus had been there a decade. He knew every route, every shortcut. But the call was still active in the system, and his radio crackled with static when he tried to call dispatch. So he did what night workers do best. He adapted. He wheeled the gurney into the elevator. The doors closed silently. There were no buttons inside. None. Just a single panel that lit up on its own. The elevator began to descend. Marcus felt pressure in his ears, stronger than usual. The digital display didn't show floors. It showed a symbol he didn't recognize, something like a line crossed through a circle. The ride lasted longer than any elevator ride he'd taken in that hospital. When the doors opened, Marcus didn't recognize where he was. This wasn't the morgue. The hallway was narrow, concrete walls, exposed pipes. The air smelled old, like dust and antiseptic layered over time. Lights flickered as he stepped out. The elevator doors closed behind him. He pushed the gurney forward slowly. Every instinct told him he was somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. Doors lined the hall. Some were metal, some looked older than the building itself. And then he heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging. Coming from behind him. Marcus turned around. The elevator was gone. In its place was a blank concrete wall. No seam, no doors, nothing. His breathing quickened. He tried his radio again. Nothing but static. That's when the body on the gurney moved, just slightly. Not sitting up, not dramatic, just a slow shift under the sheet, like a breath being taken that shouldn't exist. Marcus backed away. Now I want you to be honest with yourself. If you were standing there, would you look? Marcus did. He lifted the corner of the sheet. The face staring back at him wasn't unfamiliar. It was his own. Same scar near the eyebrow, same tired eyes, same expression he'd seen in the mirror 1,000 times after long shifts. The eyes opened, and they were wet. The body whispered his name. Marcus dropped the sheet and ran. He didn't know where he was going. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly. Doors passed that he didn't remember seeing before, some marked with numbers that didn't exist in the hospital system. Finally, a red exit sign flickered ahead. He slammed through the door and fell forward onto a familiar tile floor. He was back in the hospital. Same lights, same sounds, same distant beeping. His radio crackled back to life. Security found him minutes later, shaken and pale, sitting outside the real morgue. There was no gurney, no body, no record of the transport request. But here's the part that made Marcus quit. Security footage showed him pushing an empty gurney into elevator C. Alone. The elevator never went down. It never moved at all. And one last thing. When Marcus cleared out his locker for the last time, he found something he swears he never put there. A wrist tag with his name on it. If you've made it this far, you're the kind of person these stories are meant for. Let me know you were here, and if you don't want to miss the next one, you know what to do. Hospitals are meant to save lives, but sometimes they keep things that shouldn't have left.